It's an election unlike any other in American history. Vice President Kamala Harris wants to be the first female president, while her opponent, former President Donald Trump, is hoping for an elusive second term in office, despite being a convicted felon. Good evening and welcome to GHS-TV's live coverage of Election Night 2024. I'm Calvin Nicholson, and tonight is guaranteed to leave us all on the edge of our seats as the results roll in. It's not just the presidential race we'll be keeping an eye on, but as usual, we'll be following the Senate race, where the Democrats hope to keep their razor-thin majority despite an unfavorable map. That includes a Tennessee U.S. Senate race between incumbent Republican Marsha Blackburn and Democratic challenger State Representative Gloria Johnson, who burst onto the scenes as one of the Tennessee Three. In the House, the Republicans want to stay in majority and increase their numbers with many Trump-backed candidates. And then we will turn to local politics as Memphis voters decide to approve the 3 gun control amendments. But first, the race everyone is talking about, the election of the next president of the United States. It's been a wild ride since July 21st, when President Joe Biden announced he was stepping down from the race, and the next day, Vice President Kamala Harris was at the top of the ticket. What was once thought as an easy victory for former President Donald Trump now was a tight race. Harris has made up in nearly ground in every state that Biden had fallen behind in. The polls in all swing states are within margin of error, meaning it's anyone's race. In the last month of the election, the economy has been at front and center as new jobs reportedly show a healthy economy. But a major strike by port workers also threatened $1 billion of imported goods. Republicans seized on the issue, blaming Harris. Reproductive rights are also a top election issue this year. Many states, including Florida, have constitutional amendments on the ballot enshrining reproductive rights in the state's constitution. Democrats have been running on the issue, and both Harris and Trump believe their vision for the United States will bring the people out to the polls. So let's get to some results. We're starting in our own state, the volunteer state, Tennessee. News source CNN is reporting that Trump is the projected winner, with 21% of the total votes counted. Harris has 23% of the votes, while former President Donald Trump has 77% of the votes. We're moving to the Sunflower State, Kansas. News source CNN is reporting with no projected winner at this current time. With only 8% of the total votes counted, Harris has 48% of the votes, while Trump has 50% of the votes. I will have more results for you in about 10 minutes. Now let's turn to the U.S. House, where Republicans are trying to keep control by 3 majority votes. However, all polls indicate the Democrats who lost the House in the 2022 midterms will most likely flip the seats needed to take the House. Here with the preview of what we can expect is U.S. House anchor Tyler Curry. Tyler?
Thanks, Calvin. Democrats are hoping for a blue wave this November. While Republicans have the majority right now, there's a tough battle for power ahead. The goal of the Democrats is to gain control of the House by flipping 6 or more seats. Republicans are trying to keep control of the House. 2024 was one of the most unproductive years when it came to bills being passed in the United States. In the 118th Congress, only 82 bills were passed this term, which compared to the 362 laws passed by the 117th Congress isn't much. The goal for both parties is to get an overwhelming majority in the House to keep from bills being stalled by a few people. That being said, let's get to some of these races. Going to Ohio's 9th District, CNN is reporting that with 41% of the votes counted, current Democratic incumbent Marcy Kupfer holds 54% of the votes, while Republican Derek Merrin holds 44% of the votes. Moving over to Connecticut's 5th District, CNN is reporting that with 4% of the votes counted, Hayes holds 58% of the votes, while Republican Logan holds 42% of the votes. It's going to be a long night for many candidates. I have more results for you shortly.
Now let's turn our attention to the upper chambers of Congress, the Senate, where the situation is flipped. Democrats are trying to keep their slim majority, and Republicans think they have the right candidates to oust red state Democrats. Here to explain it all to us is U.S. Senate anchor Kendall Stewart.
Thank you, Calvin, and good evening, everyone. This year's Senate race is shaping up to be an exciting one. Democrats currently hold 51 seats in the Senate, while Republicans hold 49. That means the GOP only has to pick up 2 seats to regain control. While the Democrats can't afford to lose any, that's going to be easier said than done. The Democrats are defending 23 seats to the Republicans' 11, and making the math even harder for Dems in West Virginia. Once a reliable blue state, the state is now solidly red. All polls and predictions show the Democratic seat will go to Republican. That means Republicans need 1 seat for control, and that could come from Montana. In fact, I have some results for you right now. Going to the state of Indiana, news source CNN reports with 37% of the votes in, with projected winner Republican Banks ahead with 62% of the vote, and Democrat McCray with 36%. Now going to the race in Vermont, news source CNN reports with 27% of the votes counted, with projected winner Bernie Sanders and with 60%, and Republican Gerald Malloy with 36%. I'll keep you updated throughout the night on how the U.S. Senate race is playing out in all the key states. Calvin, back to you.
Thank you, Kendall. This year, Tennessee has another high-profile Senate race on its hands. In 2018, Republican Marsha Blackburn beat out popular former Democratic Governor Phil Bredesen to become the first female from the U.S. Senator from the volunteer state. It was a pinnacle of a political career spanning decades. Here's how Senator Marsha Blackburn got to where she is today.
Marsha Blackburn was elected to the U.S. Senate in 2018, becoming the first woman in history to represent Tennessee in the upper chamber. She beat out popular former Democratic Governor Phil Bredesen by a large margin, winning all but 3 states.
Tennesseans also want to have a U.S. Senator who is going to work to build the wall and ban sanctuary cities.
This was the most counties ever won in an open Senate election. Blackburn is a Tea Party Republican and has been called staunchly conservative.
And she said, I'm going to protect the tax cuts, I'm going to repeal Obamacare, and we're going to stop the criminals who are marching toward our border.
During her first year in the Senate, GovTrack estimated her to be the most ideological conservative member of the Senate. This year, Blackburn served as chairperson for the Republican National Committee's official party platform. She's a fierce supporter of Trump.
Let me ask you a question. Who is going to look at those 85,000 IRS agents and say, "You're fired, Donald Trump"?
After Biden won the 2020 United States presidential election, Blackburn supported Trump's false claims of victory and raised funds to support the Trump campaign's efforts to overturn the election results in court.
I am Marsha Blackburn from the great state of Tennessee.
During her tenure in the Senate, Blackburn has focused on rural constituents and school programs. In 2023, Blackburn introduced the Rural Health Agenda Act. The agenda housed 3 bills: the Rural Health Innovation Act, the Rural America Health Core Act, and the Save Rural Hospitals Act. She said her goal was to make quality care accessible close to people's homes. In March of this year, Blackburn introduced the Bipartisan After School Act. This would establish a grant to local communities to help maintain and strengthen after-school programs to stop the increase of crime rising in Shelby County and other counties. While the bill is still in committee, it has been endorsed by Memphis Mayor Paul Young and Shelby County Mayor Lee Harris.
And it is indeed a testament to building consensus around bipartisan solutions that are going to last.
Democratic State Representative Gloria Johnson catapulted onto the national stage as a member of the so-called Tennessee Three. They got their nickname after her Republican colleagues in the state House tried to expel her and 2 others, including local state representative Justin Pearson. Now she hopes her name and recognition and stance on more liberal issues will be a winning combination to unseat U.S. Senator Marsha Blackburn.
State Representative Gloria Johnson was born in Denver, Colorado. She attended University of Tennessee, Knoxville, where she has been ever since. She has her bachelor's in arts, special education, and teaching. As a 27-year special needs educator at Knoxville Central High School, Johnson says she grew disheartened by Tennessee's elected leaders criticizing public school students' rights.
I have never felt more ready to fight for Tennessee that works for all of us.
She also says she understands the impact of being a victim of gun violence at a young age.
We're going to continue to build that coalition. We will not be divided, and that is how we'll win this race.
That's because in August 2008, sophomore student Ryan McDonald was shot in the chest by a fellow student in the school cafeteria. This took place only a few feet away from the school's officer, who was doing paperwork close by. So she decided to do something about it. In 2012, she ran for the Tennessee House in Knoxville and won. She has fought for her students and teachers ever since.
You have to be accessible to every voter.
The 2008 incident provides context to her stance on gun control, which is a central issue in her campaign and led to her nearly being expelled from the Tennessee House as a part of the Tennessee Three.
There's one common denominator. It's the guns. It's the people that have the guns, because we are not doing anything to make sure that people who are not safe don't have guns.
The nickname was given to her Nashville Representative Justin Jones and Memphis Representative Justin Pearson after they joined demonstrators in the chamber's public galleries during a legislative session 3 days after the 2023 Nashville school shooting. Jones and Pearson were expelled. In addition to gun control, Johnson is also running on protecting abortion rights. She has been open about being a survivor of a medically necessary abortion.
80% of Tennesseans want abortion care on some level.
Quality and affordable health care, along with increasing public school funding, are also part of her platform.
I'm Gloria Johnson, and I'm running for U.S. Senate.
Presidential results are pouring in, and I've got some new numbers for you, starting with North Carolina. News source CNN is reporting, with no projected winner at this current time, and 17% of the total votes counted, that Harris has 48% of the votes, while former President Donald Trump has 51% of the votes. Coming into the night, people believe that the race was virtually tied. Going to Pennsylvania, the Keystone State. News source CNN is reporting, with no projected winner at this current time, and only 11% of the total votes counted, Harris has 70% of the votes, while former President Donald Trump has 29% of the votes. Both candidates spent their final campaigning days campaigning in the state, trying to pick up those 19 electoral college votes, more than any swing state. Going to the Peach State, Georgia. News source CNN is reporting, with no projected winner at this current time, and 54% of the total votes counted, Harris has 44% of the votes, while former President Donald Trump has 56% of the votes. Georgia has 16 electoral college votes, which is crucial for both Harris and Trump to pick up those votes. Now moving on to Maryland. News source Politico is reporting that Harris is the projected winner at this current time, with only 1% of the votes counted. Harris has 30% of the votes, where former President Donald Trump has 67% of the votes. Now moving to Alabama. News source Politico is reporting that Trump is the projected winner. Harris has 30% of the votes, where former President Trump has 69% of the votes. We're moving to Illinois. News source CNN is reporting, with no projected winner at this current time, and 5% of the total votes counted, Harris has 60% of the votes, while former President Donald Trump has 38% of the votes. Now let's get into an update on the U.S. Senate with anchor Kendall Stewart.
That's right, Calvin. We are getting the first numbers in from Ohio, where the GOP hope to pick up a seat. In Ohio, there's currently no projected winner at this time, with CNN reporting with 42% of the votes in, with Democrat incumbent Sherrod Brown ahead with 50% of the votes, and Republican Marino with 47%. Now let's moving on to the state of Pennsylvania. News source CNN reports with 11% of the votes in, with Democrat incumbent Bob Casey with 70% of the votes, and Republican McCormick with 28%. Now in Michigan, news source CNN reports with 6% of the votes in, with Democrat Alyssa Slockins ahead with 58%, and Republican Rogers with 39%. Now in Tennessee, news source CNN reports with 29% of the votes in, with projected winner Marsha Blackburn ahead with 74% of the votes, and Democrat Gloria Johnson with 25%. Now in Connecticut, CNN reports with 1% of the votes in, with Democrat incumbent Chris Murphy ahead with 60% of the votes, and Republican Corey with 39%. Now Finally, in West Virginia, news source CNN reports with 35% of the votes, with projected winner Republican Jim Justice with 67% of the votes, and Democrat Glenn Elliott with 30%. I'll be back in the next half hour with more results. Back to you, Calvin.
Kendall, with such strong opinions from both parties on a hot-button issue, how do you see the factors playing out in the Senate?
Well, Calvin, the relevance of these issues is significant. Senators like Catherine Cortez Masto in Nevada are campaigning heavily on protecting reproductive rights, linking it to personal freedoms, which resonates with suburban women voters. Republicans have had 2 years to figure out a response since the overturning of Roe v. Wade, and they are coming up empty-handed. On the other side, Republicans like Rick Scott in Florida are framing immigration as a key issue, arguing for stronger border security. This strategy aims to energize their base and attract undecided voters concerned about safety and economic impacts. This has always been an Achilles heel for Democrats for as long as I can remember. The contrasting strategies are pivotal in shaping the races. Thank you, Calvin. Back to you.
Thank you, Kendall. Let's find out if the Democrats have enough momentum to chip away at the Republican slim majority. Tyler Curry has an update on the battle for the House.
Hey, Calvin. We're going to start New Jersey's 7th District, where CNN reports that with 17% of the votes counted, current Republican incumbent Thomas Keene Jr. holds 47% of the votes, while his Democratic opponent Altman holds 52% of the votes. Moving over to Michigan's 7th District, CNN is reporting that with 9% of the votes counted, Hurdle is falling behind with 38% of the votes, while his Republican opponent Tom Barrett holds 58%. Looking at North Carolina's 1st District, CNN is reporting that with 26% of the votes counted, current Democratic incumbent Donald Davis holds 53% of the votes, while his Republican opponent Lori Buckout is falling behind with 44%. Now, Davis is running for re-election, but before that, he has a long history of helping out the state, whereas he served as mayor of Snow Hill for 7 years, and before that was elected to Congress, where he served as Senate on 2 separate occasions. But Buckout's campaign is focused on supporting working families in the district, meaning that many voters may be split on who they want to run their state. Moving over to Tennessee's 8th District, ABC News is reporting that with 89% of the votes counted, Democrat Freeman holds 24% of the votes, where Republican Kustoff is taking the lead with 75%. Looking at the 17th District of Illinois, CNN is reporting that with 3% of the votes counted, current Democratic incumbent Eric Sorensen holds 43% of the votes, while Republican McGraw holds 57% of the votes. We're working to get more results for you. I'll have those in about 20 minutes. Calvin?
Immigration has been a touchstone of the U.S. political debate for decades. However, Congress has continued to disagree on a comprehensive immigration reform, effectively moving some major policy decisions into the executive and judicial branches of government. GHS-TV partnered with Ms. Thorpe's government class to bring you The Road to Election. Shontario Jones and Aaron Johnson tells us where the candidates stand.
According to the former president's website, he will, quote, shut down Biden's border disaster, end quote. Mr. Trump wants to restore the Remain in Mexico program and complete the construction of the border wall. He promises to carry out the, quote, largest domestic deportation operation in American history, end quote. This will require relocating military troops to the U.S.-Mexico border, authorizing Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, raids of workplaces denying due to process to unauthorized migrants, constructing additional ICE detention facilities along the southern border, and overturning the Flores settlement, which provides protections for migrant children. He wants to end birthright citizenship for children of undocumented immigrants. Finally, he would give automatic green cards for non-citizen graduates of U.S. colleges and universities.
On the other side of the aisle, Vice President Harris' campaign website says she and Governor Walz, quote, believe in tough, smart solutions to secure the border keep communities safe, and reform our broken immigration system. As vice president, she supported the bipartisan border security bill, the strongest reform in decades. After the bill's failure to pass in, she and President Biden acted on their own, and now border crossings are at the lowest level in 4 years. Their administration is seizing record amounts of fentanyl and secured funding for the most significant increase in border agents in 10 years. As president, she says she will bring back the bipartisan border security bill and sign it into law. At the same time, she says she knows that the immigration system is broken and needs comprehensive reform that includes strong border security and an urgent pathway to citizenship.
Every year, the election brings up questions about the state of our democracy. Is it functioning properly? Can it improve? And are there checks and balances? Our U.S. House anchor Tyler Curry spoke with University of Memphis professor Ebony Dawkins about this year's election.
Now, I don't want to bore our viewers with a government lesson, but can you first briefly explain the 3 branches of government?
Yes, so in our federal government, or the central form of our government, there are 3 branches of government. You have the legislative branch of government, that's the lawmaking branch. Most people understand this to be the House of Representatives and the Senate. And then you have the executive branch of government. This is the office of the president, the office of the vice president, and then all of the kind of bureaucratic offices that kind of work the executive function of our government. And then finally, there's the judiciary branch of government. Now, in our federal government, this is primarily the United States Supreme Court, but then there are also other courts in our federal government. You have district courts and you also have courts of appeal. So as people file cases, maybe because they don't like a law that was made by the legislative branch, or if they're upset about something that was done by the executive branch, they might file a lawsuit. And that is how we learn about how the different branches of government work and what the law is.
And what checks and balances are put in place so that one branch isn't more powerful than another? And how well do they work?
So there are multiple kind of ways in which we think about checks and balances. So first, within the articles of the U.S. Constitution, Articles 1, 2, and 3, that kind of create the different branches of government, there are rules that are put in place about what each branch of government has the right to do. In that, there are limitations that are already in place in the U.S. Constitution, but also in the few hundred years that our country has been a country, there have been lots of changes and rules that have been made, either by way of practice, by way of habit, or in some cases by way of Supreme Court rulings that tell us what each branch of government can do and cannot do.
Now, former President Donald Trump, some say that he really tested our system and some say that he nearly broke it. So what would a win for President Trump mean for our system this time around?
That's a really heavy question, and I think it depends kind of on what it is that you would like to see. So there are people who support former President Donald Trump. There are people who support him as a candidate. And no doubt in their mind, their belief is that if President Donald Trump were to win an election, that this would have positive impacts for the government. In many cases, people are thinking a lot more about opportunities in them for business or opportunities for them to potentially make money. But then there are also people who quite rightfully are concerned about a win for former President Donald Trump. And that is because in addition to, his promises with respect to business and wealth generation, there are also a lot of concerning things that are being said about the rights of women, the rights of people who are LGBTQ, even kind of, I think about it as the rights of students when we think about what's happening with the United States Department of Education by way of example. And in that sense, I think that an argument can certainly be made that a win for President Trump, we might begin to feel in our day-to-day lives kind of a backsliding of what we have enjoyed or what we have believed to be our rights in this country.
Now, the Supreme Court has weighed in on a lot of hot issues as of recently. They even agreed to review a Tennessee law banning transgender affirming care for minors this term. Each time they hand down a ruling, it sounds like it's going against the opinions of majority of Americans. So why is that?
There are a lot of reasons for that. I try not to be too partisan in conversations about what's happening with the United States Supreme Court, but I can tell you as a teacher of public law and also a scholar that is looking at the impact of our courts on our everyday experience, one of the major issues that we are seeing is that with lifelong federal appointments, there's not as much oversight over our federal courts and even over some state court positions as over other branches of government. And quite frankly, this has led to some issues with regard to folks who are in the Supreme Court having interests that are divergent from the interests of the people. So one example of this is last year when the United States Supreme Court was handing down a decision that effectively overturned Roe versus Wade. Before that decision came down, Justice Clarence Thomas was quoted in, I believe it was the New York Times newspaper, basically saying that the Supreme Court does not have to make decisions that the people of the United States will necessarily agree with or be happy with. Now, this is very interesting because it is actually the opposite of what Supreme Court justices in previous years have said. Historically, the United States Supreme Court has understood its role to be not only interpreting the law, but also interpreting the law in the way that the people that exist right now in this moment understand it. And so we are experiencing a time right now where the people of the United States have one idea about what it means to be free, about what it means to live in a multicultural society, about what it means to be inclusive. We want more of our neighbors, more of our classmates, more of our friends, more of our family members to also experience full freedom in the United States. And unfortunately, we're currently dealing with a United States Supreme Court that doesn't believe that their role is to follow what it is that the people of the United States wish to see.
Overall, why does one person's vote truly matter?
Every vote counts because you're here. And the rules that are made in our society will affect you. And voting is the first opportunity that you have in order to register what your desire is and make your voice known. And so I always say, don't silence yourself, right? Make your voice known when you have the opportunity and in the manner that's provided for you.
Well, Professor Dawkins, this conversation was very helpful. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you.
More interviews are headed your way. Plus, we got the latest results from tonight's exciting races. But right now, we're going to take a short break. GHS-TV's live coverage of Election Night 2024 will be right back.